Hello again. Many of the most famous battles fought by the British Army were in the nature of set pieces, where the British Army and the one opposing it met in some piece of open country or farmland, and then the two sides fought to see which was the stronger. Agincourt was such a battle, as was Waterloo. Civilians and their homes were usually unaffected by such events. There were, of course, sieges which did involve civilians, but often an entire war could be fought on plain, some way from people's homes. Such battles were, of course, seen as late as the Second World War. One thinks, for example, of El Alamein in 1942. But by that time, war had more often than not become something which involved civilians directly. We remember the Blitz on London and the Siege of Leningrad. This is how most wars are being fought today, in and around areas where people are living in their homes. Inevitably, this makes for loss of life of non-combatants and collateral damage to their homes. We've seen this in Ukraine, of course. It seems to be the rule these days rather than the exception. It's something that most of us find appalling, but is nevertheless common. Sometimes this is caused by armed forces which embed themselves in the civilian population, staying in neighbouring houses and generally mingling with them. This makes it very difficult for somebody wishing to fight them to do so without affecting civilians. The thumbnail to this video shows what this can lead to. It is not Gaza, nor is it the aftermath of Hiroshima. It is actually the French port of Le Havre. The German army held the town in 1944, and so 3 months after D-Day, when the British and Americans wished to advance, they were compelled to attack the German soldiers where they were, which was scattered throughout the city. Using a combination of high explosives and incendiaries dropped from the air, the Allies simply destroyed the entire town, leaving nothing but rubble and ashes. And remember, that was a town belonging to the country they had come to liberate. About 5,000 French people were killed, civilians, by the way, were killed during the Allied attacks on Le Havre. The case is very similar to that of Izzedine al-Qassam, the military arm of Hamas in Gaza, and of course Hezbollah in Lebanon. These are essentially armies which are based in civilian districts. Israel are fighting a war with both Hamas and Hezbollah, and that means that their attacks are going to cause a lot of damage to the infrastructure of the area where those groups are operating from, as well as civilian casualties. It has been this way for 50 years to my certain knowledge. I lived in the Galil for a year, and we could hear the artillery on the Lebanese border at night. In those days it was Fatah, of course. They were mainly firing Katyushas mounted on lorries, old Russian rockets dating from the Second World War. They would position them near a mosque or school and then fire off a dozen of the things. When the Israelis worked out the direction from which the firing was coming, they would then fire back with their artillery, sometimes hitting the school or surrounding homes. It is an old game, and the way that it's being played now doesn't differ at all from the way it was being played half a century ago. For my own part, I detest war, but the truth is, people do get killed during wars. In the description to this video, I give a link to a piece of mine on this subject, which is on my Substack account. It gives more information about the destruction of Le Havre. It's free to read, of course.